Thank you, Mr. Chair. Repeal and reenact with amendments. Page 2, lines 2 and 3. That's how this bill starts out. Why? Because in 2019, the majority, just like today, decided it was appropriate to infringe upon the rights of the minority. And so there's a court case pending, a court case that could take out the underlying ERPO law. And so this law is necessary to be framed in this way in order to ensure that the court can intervene, in order to ensure that this law continues. And dare I say, in order to ensure that the public outside of this building doesn't understand what the tyranny of the majority looks like. Repeal and reenact, because we infringe upon minority rights. Minority rights which so many people in this room run on to protect.
Representative Luck,
It is repeal and reenact, Mr. Chair, and that is what I'm speaking to.
Excuse me for one moment, please.
Yes.
I'll give you a chance to make your case, but I would like to finish my sentence first. I think that you're close and you're still within the scope of the bill, but please make sure that you're remembering that the debate is about the content of the bill. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Repeal and reenact. Repeal and reenact a statute that is designed to take rights. To take rights from people who have not yet done anything. They haven't done anything. It's a thought crime that makes them susceptible to violence, that makes them susceptible to harm. So often in the world, the Second Amendment is framed as a love of guns. In fact, members of my party often hear from anti-Second Amendment folks, you love your guns more than you love life. But the truth is that the Second Amendment is a corollary to the right to life. It is necessary in order to preserve and protect life. This body has a duty to secure our rights, has a duty to secure and protect the right to life. Now, that right doesn't come from this body. Because despite some beliefs, government is not God. It is not the ultimate authority. Our right to life is derived from God. Our right to defend our life is derived from God. With each tragedy we hear, we have to do something. Quick, we have to do something. No, ladies and gentlemen, we have to do the right thing. And time after time, bodies like ours across this nation pass laws that make victims more vulnerable to harm. Time after time. We leave the innocent more vulnerable. These laws, they don't restrict the law-breaking parties in our society. We see that. When we look at those who are committing these crimes so often, they've broken all the laws. In fact, the stats that I have suggest that less than 7% of crime is committed with legally purchased firearms. No. What we tend to do in these types of bills is restrict the law-abiding, which again is proven by the data that my party showed in suggesting that more than 2/3 of the ERPO that have already been issued in the last few years were overturned as unsubstantiated. They give us a false sense of doing something. And all the while, they fail to do the right thing. We're not here talking about family breakdown and how the lack of fatherlessness contributes to the violence in our communities. We don't talk about the fact that so many of the mass shooters are coming from homes without fathers. We don't talk root causes. That's an uncomfortable space. No, we cover up with this kind of thing. Well, if we just take their weapons, well, how many times have we seen people have their weapons taken? The El Paso County Sheriff's Office, they issued a statement after the Club Q, after they were able to come forth with information they have to show that they took weapons from the assailant and they didn't return them. We all care about the innocent. I agree with the Assistant Majority Leader in that. That is not the question. We do not want harm. The question is, how do we best protect them? How do we best protect them? Yes, there have been an increase in purchases of guns. Why? Well, maybe we should look at other policies we're implementing. There's a claim that we have an increase in guns because we somehow distrust one another. Maybe we have reason to. Did you know that estimates of defensive gun use, while they vary, the most trusted studies estimate that more than 2.5 million Americans use a firearm to protect themselves or others every single year. And in over 90% of those cases, they just brandish it, which means all they have to do is show that they have it, and people leave. 2.5 million every year. That's 200,000 every month, 7,000 every day, 300 every hour, 5 every minute, and 1 about every 12 seconds. If that is shocking or unusual to anyone's experience, really shouldn't be. Nor should we automatically dismiss the tools needed by those living in less safe areas to be protected. But even if that doesn't qualify, we can talk about how here in Denver, an urban area with a fast response time compared to some parts of Colorado, including parts of my district, it can take about 15 minutes on a priority call before the police will arrive. 15 minutes when there is an active shooter, 15 minutes when seconds count. And yet here we are talking about a bill that enables folks to be left defenseless. We had a number of things to discuss on this bill. There are areas in this bill that we really need to flush out. For instance, why is it that some of the individuals that can file these petition orders have to have an actual relationship with the respondent, and some of them do not? Why is that fair? Why is it that we have different standards in here? Why do we have it for 365 days, not a shorter time frame? We could and should have had an opportunity to go through all of these different sections. And yet, we weren't able to, unfortunately. We weren't able to. We weren't able to have that conversation which is unfortunate because, while some might see the conversation as time wasting, as interrupting of schedules, some of us believe that we were engaging in principled dialogue, in discourse, the thing that we are supposed to be doing, vetting policy. Vetting policy. We were encouraged that there was a desire to let us all come together and find something in between where we can all agree. Well, that's quite challenging when the amendments we put forth aren't accepted, either on screen or off screen, and when debate is truncated. It leaves things feeling pretty shallow, pretty hollow, I should say. Extreme risk protection order. You know, there was a story coming out of Maryland where a niece was disgruntled, didn't really care for the politics of her uncle, and so she filed one of these against him. The rest of the family said, hey, you know what, he's fine. Yeah, he's a passionate and outspoken sort, but he was a harm to nobody. And when they came to collect his weapons, resulted in an altercation that resulted in his death. One of my colleagues pointed out some data about law enforcement prior to ERPO and after, and showed that actually felonious death of police officers increased quite substantially after the 2019 law was introduced. He thought that there was a correlation there. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that there would be that kind of pushback. It's also interesting that in 2018, the ACLU came out against these types of bills. That's right, the American Civil Liberties Union came out against Red Flag in 2018. Quote, they were deeply concerned about its breadth, its impact on civil liberties, and the precedent it sets for the use of coercive measures against individuals, not because they are alleged to have committed any crime, but because somebody believes they might someday commit one. As with this bill, with the issuance of an order, police would have broad authority to search an individual's home. That's one of the amendments we were looking at bringing, to say that actually we would allow the people to surrender it, and only if there was probable cause to believe that they hadn't surrendered all of them, that a search warrant would be issued. Not that it would just be granted as part of the process, to allow people to be further violated in their person and their property. Again, the ACLU said that these kinds of orders could be issued without any evidence that the person ever committed or has ever threatened to commit an act of violence with a firearm. They said this kind of legislation allows a court to intervene in potentially major and intrusive ways on a person's liberty and property interests without any indication, much less suggestion, that the person has engaged in any criminal court, or even that he or she may do so imminently. In that regard, the bill places judges in the unenviable, indeed impossible position of trying to predict who may or may not become a mass murderer, which is quite a lot of pressure, especially when we know what happens in the press when such things take place and people say, well, they knew and they should have done something. So many judges could be pressured to issue an ERPO even without the fullness of the standard. For wouldn't it be better to violate the rights of one in order to prevent the possible harm of others, and of the reputation or career of that judge. Did you know more violence is committed with your hands and your feet? It's true. Look it up. More instances of violence happen with someone's hands by a staggering amount. Similarly, knives. Look at what's going on in the UK and EU right now. They're banning them because they've already banned guns, but lo and behold, they still have crime. Why? Because it's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. Because we have so cultivated a culture of death, a culture of hatred towards each other, a culture of villainization towards each other. We're not dealing with the root causes. We're dealing with those things that, again, make us feel good because we do something. Not something that is effective. We've had that conversation briefly. These aren't. No. We don't want to deal with those hard places. Because it is a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. Even today, I've had some conversations, spoken some words that are not consistent with my normal character, harbored a hardness in my own heart. How quickly that transfers into action in communities that cultivate that and don't model other things. Repeal and reenact with amendments. Repeal and reenact. The fears that have been spoken today about this bill and the abuses of it, one could make parallels to why the repeal and reenact with amendments language is there. Could make parallels to a vote that was just taken. When we look at each other as obstacles to our own goals, when we look at each other as people that aren't worth anything, we find ourselves in situations where bills like this are necessary. So why not here in this body we model what it looks like to have conversation even with people we disagree with, even when it takes longer than we think it should. Mr. Chair, in honor of those who fought in 2019, in honor of that court case, in honor of the minority, I ask that this bill be read at length.
There has been a request that the bill be read at length at 6:53 p.m.
A bill for an act. 101 concerning extreme risk protection orders. Bill summary.